Ahoy! Thanks to Ginie from New World Buddy, we have a first look at the new upcoming Capture the Flag map, as well as the new 33 map, which honestly looks much better than what the devs led on. They didn't really mention how cool it looks, and we're gonna look at both in this viewer, which allows Ginie to float around the map and have a look at the different areas. So right now we're starting with the 3th map here. And you can see that that has multiple floors. This was already talked about by the devs a little bit, but we can see it much better here. There's actually quite large areas with a side buff there, for example. That is the damage buff, and then there's also a rift in the middle. So this is going to be the map that will be playable this weekend, and this is the first of 2 upcoming theme maps that we're going to test. I think this is the simpler one, and as far as I understand it, possibly also a smaller one. And here you can see is one of the flags. The other flag is directly on the opposite side, so not really that far away, whereas a lot of fluff to the sides actually taken up more space. What we're looking at right now is one of the jump pads. These you can activate by standing on them and then pressing the interact button. I think at least that is the interact button, because they didn't want them to just automatically activate. And as such, there's quite a few interesting mechanics here. There's also another additional buff that gives you movement speed, which is up top, and a third buff that gives you extra health, I think, extra survivability. So this is going to go on for 10 minutes when the game is even. There, by the way, was the other buff, and here we see the spikes if you fall down the middle. And if there's a draw after 10 minutes, then there's 5 minutes overtime with the first flag to be captured afterwards, winning the game, and after 15 minutes the game is over and can end in a draw. This is going to be a 10v10 map. That's going to be quite interesting in terms of size. I'm not entirely sure what this flag location here is going to be about, or if they changed the spots for claiming the flag in between. So maybe the up top thing is not the only thing we're going to be interacting with. We'll have to find out about that. My understanding was that it's just the top flags. But either way, you can see quite a few interesting spots on this map. With this smaller top layer and the wider bottom layer. That was kind of their goal. You can also jump over the gap in the middle of the bridge at the top, but if you don't watch out, then you might fall down into the rift. And this is something also worth keeping in mind. If you're carrying the flag, you get a couple debuffs. You're slowed down a fair bit, and you cannot use certain mobility abilities, or you will lose the flag if you do, rather. Here you can see the gap where you can, if you're lucky, fall down to the floor. If you're unlucky, fall down into the spikes. So you gotta be very careful there. And along with that, you also take increased damage while carrying the flag, and it weakens the effect from the jump pad. So mobility on the map will be a fair bit weaker. It takes a little bit of time to pick up the flag, around a quarter of a second. So it's not quite instant, but pretty quick. Here you can see the starting areas probably. And all in all, I think this looks pretty cool. There's some nice design inside these buildings going on as well. I think they said it was Monarch's Bluff inspired in terms of the design, and that is map number 1 for us that we will be able to play very soon. If you're enjoying the video so far, then consider subscribing and clicking the bell. We're also going to look at the other map. Now, this is a new 33 arena map, so same system as before, but it's a very different layout. What they said about this map is that it initially favors range players, and then if the game goes on longer, it starts favoring melee players, and the rounds will be different from the existing arena maps because the circle from the outside closes in quicker. And I think this map looks absolutely gorgeous, even without the shaders being applied. I love this tree. I don't know if it's an SLOTH tree, but this tree in the middle just looks really cool, this very foresty vibe. And I feel like this is a lot less favorable for ranged than they made it sound, because when they were talking about it, it sounded to me like it's just going to be an open space entirely initially, where the ranged players have all the advantage. But since there are so many pillars on this map, look at that, by the way, very nice little statue in there as well, very nice stylistic asset. Since there are so many pillars in the map, I think the advantage for ranged will not be quite that insane. It will still be there initially, but there's enough room to navigate around, climb up and down and all that, to make sure that you're able to avoid range players to a certain degree, even as a melee player. Also, there are a lot of obstacles here, which is good if you're using that a new perk which is called something parkour, I don't know from the top of my head, but that allows you to get movement speed or haste from climbing on certain things up and down, which there are quite a lot of here, so just a nice little extra bonus. I think the layout in itself is somewhat similar to the desert map without the upper and lower layer setup, but still it's kind of a bigger outer circle with the stairs and everything, and then you have the contested center point, but that one sits a fair bit lower this time. It's also probably not quite as protected in the same way. I'm assuming you might be able to shoot around the tree, but either way, even if not, again, the advantage for melee players comes later when things are closing in. Though, we'll see how much of that is actually true, because even when the things are closing in, being able to kite effectively is still going to be very, very strong. This map doesn't really have as much of a unique asset collection, I would say, as many other maps do, where you have quite a few different thematic elements weaved into them. I feel like outside of the statues that you see like at the very edges, this is very much just trees and athos trees maybe, but I don't mind that either. I think the map is maybe a bit dark, but that could possibly also just be the viewer. It could be that with the shaders and everything enabled and the lighting enabled, this might actually be a much brighter map than the impression we're getting here. What's also obviously very interesting is this surface here, because it kind of looks like water. I think it probably will be water. I don't know if it'll be deep enough to swim in or just shallow water to run in. My guess would be just shallow water, but it's hard to tell with the shading effect and what's going on there. But I think it's just shallow water to run around in, which would kind of be a nice way to break up the otherwise mostly foresty vibe. So yeah, I think this is a very nice, interesting map. I enjoy the style here. I think we definitely should have more variety in the PvP modes. I think that's a great improvement for New World in general. And that absolutely adds to it, having 3 maps in rotation possibly. Or maybe they just throw out the first arena map at some point. I wouldn't mind that either. And that's actually pretty cool. I didn't notice that before, that there's a little gap between the trees here in the middle where you can kind of fight between them as well. Thought there was just one big one. But yeah, all in all, I like this map, I like the setup, and I love that Ginie was able to pull this out of the files and give us a first look at this, because it's really, really cool, and also a way to maybe spot some things that you can't really spot while you're in an arena match, or maybe certain areas that you can't normally get to. So, big fan of that as well. So, thanks to Ginie for making this available to us so we can have a first look at it. And other than that, I'm looking forward to trying out the map a little bit on the weekend, even though I unfortunately won't have as much time to do that as I would have liked to. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing and clicking the bell. If you'd like to support me further, you can do so on Patreon. Thanks to all of my patrons who already do exactly that, and thank you for watching. Duke Sloth, out.